Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Marty Shepherd and it's a pleasure to be here as a District 9820 Australian Rotary Health Chair. We are here to celebrate the Australian Rotary Health Lift the Lid Mental Health Month by promoting the phenomenal research that Australian Rotary Health has done, and in particular the research grant that was given many years ago now to Professor Tony Jorm and Betty Kitchener. They've undertaken their own research over a great many years. Tony Jorm is a mental health researcher at the University of Melbourne. His research interest is in the building the community's capacity for prevention and early intervention for mental health problems. He is a co-founder of Mental Health First Aid Training, along with his wife Betty, and is the chair of the board of Mental Health First Aid International. He is also editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Mental Health and Prevention. In his spare time, he's a member of the Rotary Club of Carlton and was president in 2019 to 20. Alongside his role on the Research Committee of Australian Rotary Health, he's been doing this for many years, including a term as chair of the committee. Betty is the founder and past inaugural CEO of Mental Health First Aid Australia and, until recently, an adjunct professor at Deakin University. Betty has had a wide variety of experience in her working life, starting as a school teacher, then a counsellor, then a registered nurse. At the age of 50, Betty co-founded, with her husband, Tony, the Mental Health First Aid program. She herself, having experienced recurrent episodes of major depression, this brings out an important consumer perspective to her work. She has facilitated the spread of the Mental Health First Aid program across Australia and to over 23 countries. Betty has received numerous awards for her mental health work. She has now retired from paid work, but as a member of the Rotary Club of Flemington, Kensington, she has found herself for a variety of ways to continue to make positive contributions to Rotary and indeed society. The Lift the Lid on Mental Illness is Australian Rotary Health's national annual fundraising for mental health research. The campaign, founded by Australian Rotary Health Vice Chairman Greg Ross, started in 2016 in partnership with the Rotary Clubs of Victoria. The event was such a success that it has now been extended to all Rotary clubs across Australia. Every year, approximately 1 in 5 Australians will experience a mental illness, and in order to help future generations of young Australians, we need to look ahead through research and find out how we can prevent this type of illness occurring. I would now like to warmly welcome Tony and Betty to give us their presentation on researchers behind Australian Rotary Health First Aid in Mental Health, a course that has been completed by 800,000 Australians and over 4 million people worldwide. Over to you, Betty and Tony.
Tony and I are going to do a joint presentation. I'd like to first of all tell you about the Mental Health First Aid program that Marty's introduced so well. Thanks, Marty. And then Tony will talk about the contribution that Australian Rotary Health has done with grants to really help the Mental Health First Aid program get going and spread internationally. So it all started before the turn of the century. In late 1990s, Tony, who was then a professor at Australian National University in Canberra, and his colleagues did this large national survey across Australia, really looking at what was the mental health literacy of the public. How much did the public know about mental health problems? Would they know how to recognise it? Would they know how to offer initial help? Would they know what are the evidence-based things to help? Now, in Australia, I think we've got fairly good health literacy around skin damage by the sun. And we even have that wonderful motto, slip, slop, slap. But when it comes to mental health and mental illness, Tony and his colleagues' survey found that the mental health literacy rate in the public is very, very low. So just before the turn of the century, we were walking our dog. You're probably wondering why there was a photo of our dear dog, the King Charles Cavalier, who of course has gone over the Rainbow Bridge by now, bless him. And we were walking King, and Tony had been at a research meeting with some other academics, and someone had said, gee, what we need is first aid for depression. We have Red Cross and St. John's running first aid courses, but they never tell you anything about mental health problems. What about first aid for depression? Now, at that stage, I was working as a registered nurse in the Canberra hospital, and I also was teaching first aid with Red Cross. And it really hit me that I hadn't thought about that. I'm someone who's had repeated episodes of very severe depression. I've been hospitalised for it, and I have been suicidal, and I wouldn't be here except for Tony. And it just hit me. Here I was happily teaching first aid, and it hadn't occurred to me that we really need to be teaching about mental illness and how members of the public can offer that. So that was the starting point for Tony and I to get really enthusiastic about this. We had fire in the belly, and we thought, just in our spare time, we'll write this. So with Tony's academic research ability and my teaching and lived ability and lived experience, we cobbled together a mental health first aid course. We did get a reference group together and had a lot of input from people. So the photo there in the bottom right-hand corner is what we looked like on the very first year we started the course in the year 2000 at the turn of the century. So here is the definition of mental health first aid. It's the help provided to a person who might be developing a mental health problem, or maybe experiencing a worsening of an existing mental health problem, or in a mental health crisis. And the first aid is given until appropriate professional treatment is received or the crisis resolved. So it certainly isn't replacing mental health professionals. It's just like regular first aid. So it trains the public to give that early help and assistance. It's like early intervention. And there's no way after a 12-hour course you could do any diagnosing or giving any therapy. Just as in regular first aid, there's an action plan. Most people learn DRABC. Sometimes there's a few other letters tagged onto that. Well, the action plan in mental health first aid is A, L, G, E, and E. So approaching the person, assessing, assisting with any crises, listening and communicating non-judgmentally, offering support and information at a first aid level, encouraging the person to get appropriate professional help if that's what they want, and encouraging other supports. These are not steps, these are actions. It's not that you just do the listening and say, yep, I've done the listening non-judgmentally, now you listen to me, this is what you've got to do. No. Of course, you're going to have that non-judgmental approach the whole time that you're doing that. And we have a mascot for the mental health first aid program, and guess what his name is? It's Algae. Why do we need mental health first aid? Mental health problems are common. You've all heard the 1 in 5. 1 in 5 people have a mental illness. 1 in 5 people, 1 in 5 adults, are walking around in any 1 year with a common mental illness. And the common mental illnesses are anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, and substance use disorders. There are other mental illnesses. There are psychosis. There are other mental illnesses that are not counted. So 1 in 5 is a very low estimate of the number of people walking around with a diagnosable mental illness in any 1 year. And as Tony's research found, a lot of people aren't well informed in the mental health area. And maybe because of stigmatizing attitudes and lack of knowledge, a lot of people don't go and seek help for their mental health problems. Maybe they think life was just meant to be difficult and they're just supposed to grin and bear it. But there's so much out there that can help. People with mental illness themselves can have a high level of a stigma. And there certainly is discrimination that goes on. After I had an episode of severe depression and I was hospitalised in a psych ward, and I went back to my registered nurse job in ICU, the head nurse said, oh, Betty, you can't work here in ICU now, you've been in the psych ward. And she then transferred me to work in the geriatric ward. Discrimination. A lot of people, when they've got a mental health problem, don't realise that they need help, or that there's help out there that is really effective. And there's a lot, fortunately for us here in Australia, there's a lot of help. And professional help isn't always available. Even here in the cities, there's big waiting lists. And if you live out in the rural areas, a lot of people have to travel long ways to get appropriate help. Fortunately, now there's a lot of things coming online. Oops, I just gave you the flowers, Tony. Fortunately, there's a lot of wonderful evidence-based online programs now that people can do that are very, very helpful. And we do know that the first aider's actions may determine how quickly a person recovers. And from some amazing research that Tony's been involved in evaluating the course, we find that anyone who attends a mental health first aid course has much better knowledge, much better mental health literacy, stigmatising attitudes really reduce, and the type and amount of help they give to someone with a mental health problem is so much better. So here's a little diagram to show just where mental health first aid can help. As I said, it's not giving the treatment, it's not therapy, it's really like early intervention, if anything, drumming up some business for the mental health practitioners. Isn't that wonderful? Now, Tony may talk a little bit more about the research. I haven't got time to go into it all, but there's been amazing studies done with gold standard design, randomized controlled trials, meta-analysis, and across different countries now. And it shows that after doing the course, people have really improved in how to recognize that someone's not traveling well with a mental health problem. They have much more mental health knowledge, much more confident in giving assistance, but you don't want confident without competency. So this course also gives you competency. People are able to give much better help to people. Tony and I don't have a marketing cell in our brain. We really don't. And we did this as a service to community. We weren't Rotarians when we started this, but we are now. And I think this really was to help our community in Canberra. We didn't even know that it was going to spread across Australia, let alone across the world. And what's made it spread is not us being good marketers, is because of the research. And it's gone into very good scientific journals. And the very first time it spread to Scotland, I got a phone call from a Gregor Henderson, who had a big pot of money from the Scottish government. And he said, I don't want to recreate the recreate the work that you've done. How about I fly you over business class and you show us all about the mental health first aid program? And I just naively thought, oh, business class, flew over and actually gave the program away. And anyway, Scotland is still running the course. There's now a licensing agreement set up with Mental Health First Aid International, the organisation that I was CEO of. And it's now spread, as you can see there, to it's 25 countries, and over 4 million people have done the course worldwide. The largest number is in the USA. So there we go, a map of the world. It really has gone to all the English-speaking countries, and now it's going to countries where English is not the first language. Let me explain some of these to you. This ENSA here, this is from Switzerland, Ireland, you can see. This one is Hong Kong, and now it's going into China. The Netherlands, this one's Austria, USA, Canada, France, Denmark, Germany, and there's many more, but I just gave you a taste there of them. I'm just having trouble progressing the slide. There we go. Now, how do we know what to have in these courses? As much as we saw it was needed, we need to improve mental health literacy. How did we know what to teach in these courses? And this is where research funding came in. And we developed guidelines, and Tony will tell you more, because Australian Rotary Health was the very first grant that we got to develop these guidelines on how do members of the public help someone with depression. We don't want clinical practice guidelines. We didn't have a course of what the psychiatrists and mental health practitioners should do. This is what you and I, members of the public, should do. And you can see there in the left-hand column all the different mental illnesses that we've developed guidelines for. We've also developed guidelines for different specific community groups. The first one we did with our Aboriginal people. A lot of work went into that. We've done a lot in the workplace, so how do co-workers help each other? For people who are suffering financial difficulties and mental illness, sometimes the banks are not always the kindest to these people, and we've done guidelines that have really helped some of the banks improve what they do. We've also got guidelines that help someone you may know who has gambling problems. considerations if the person you're helping is from the LGBTIQ community. And one that we're just finalising now is for deaf people. And Tony and I were very, very lucky to work in this research to develop these guidelines, and we learned so much. And unfortunately, deaf people don't have good mental health literacy, and there's a lot of stigmatizing attitudes amongst themselves. And if one of their friends who is deaf has a mental illness, it's not well received. So we're developing a course for deaf people to deliver to deaf people. And then you can see on the right-hand side some other guidelines that we've developed. It takes about a year to develop each guideline and a lot of funding. We've done guidelines for depression, psychosis, eating disorders, someone with alcohol use problems, suicidal thoughts and behaviours, someone engaging in repetitive self-harm called non-suicidal self-injury, an adult who's gone through a traumatic event, a child who's gone through a traumatic event, someone having panic attacks. And that's just a flavour of them. Now you can see there's a website there at the bottom, mhfa.com.au. You can click on that and you can access any of these guidelines and you can download them. And these are ones that we have for our Aboriginal people with some lovely Aboriginal artwork on them. And we also have different courses. So the very first course that we did at the turn of the century, we called the adult course, Adults Helping Adults. That's now called the standard course. That was the very first one. That's our biggest course. Then we developed a youth course, which is adults helping young people. So that could be teachers, parents, school personnel, sports coaches, youth workers, etc. We did a teen mental health first aid course, and this is teenagers helping teenagers. We've got a junior high school course and a senior high school course for that. The last course I worked on before I stepped down as CEO was developing the older person, very fitting, the older person mental health first aid course. And this is for how do you offer mental health first aid to an older person. Now, sometimes our older people do still have some attitudes maybe from their early years about not talking about mental illness, or that, you know, you keep it hidden under the rug, and some stigmatizing attitudes. And also a lot of people don't realise older people have depression, anxiety, and they say, oh, that's just aging. It's not. Depression, anxiety doesn't need to be part of aging, or they might say it's dementia. So there's a lot to be learned in that area, and we've done a specific one for our Indigenous people. Then we have some specialised courses. These go for half a day. The core courses go for a full 12 or 14 hours. So let me just show you some little graphics. That these are some of the little booklets that go with our specialised courses. Conversations about suicide, non-suicidal self-injury, conversations about gambling. So you can just focus on one aspect if you like, but it's good to do a whole course, to do this standard course and then later on do some of the specialised courses. Now, this standard course can now be developed, delivered, especially with COVID. We got it so you can deliver it online. You go online and you do an e-learning course in your own time for about 5 to 7 hours. And then with an instructor such as myself, you have 2 Zoom sessions where you work as a class. We have a minimum of 12 people. And these are some of the topics that we look at in the standard course. And I'm currently just running one for District 9800 for mental health first aid course for some Rotarians who act as mentors to different professionals. Then that standard course has been modified to be suitable for workplaces, for people in the community. It's been tailored for different professional groups, the pharmacists, legal professionals, accountancies, tertiary students. And these have all been very, very popular. There's the older person mental health first aid program. And as you can see, we do cover confusion and dementia in this one, delirium, which is quite a crisis. Some of you would know how life-threatening that can be. And also some unsafe and challenging behaviours due to confusion. And then there's our Aboriginal course, beautiful Aboriginal artwork all the way through it. And then some of the shorter courses, our specialised courses in the Aboriginal area. That's the youth mental health first aid course. It goes for 14 hours. It also looks at eating disorders in teenagers and repetitive self-harm in teenagers. Now, if you do any of those courses that I've shown you, you get a certificate of completion, or if you go on and do an online exam, which is all multiple choice, and get 80%, well, then you get a certificate of accreditation, and you are then an accredited mental health first aider for 3 years. very similar to if you're doing regular first aid. Now, the teen mental health first aid course, and Tony will talk more about this, and this has spread overseas, particularly in the USA. Lady Gaga, some of you know about her, really became an ambassador for the teen mental health first aid course over there, and it's really gone great guns running in schools, which is just fantastic. And I think I've mentioned about the deaf course about to come, and also working on how to help people with intellectual disabilities with mental health problems, because again, people say, oh, that's just their intellectual disability. No, they have depression. They have really troublesome anxiety. There may be some psychosis there. So those courses will soon be released. I'll hand over to Tony now. You can get the flowers on your head, Tony.
Okay, thank you. I've got the flowers. That means I hold the microphone. Thanks, Betty. So Betty's given you a very comprehensive overview of mental health first aid. It started in a very small way in a dog walk and has now become very big globally. But I just want to let you know about the important role that Australian Rotary Health had in that international spread through the support for 2 research grants. So I'm going to tell you briefly about 2 grants that were held. The first one is for the development of the International Mental Health First Aid Guidelines, and the second one is for the evaluation of the Teen Mental Health First Aid course. So on to the first one with the guidelines. So when we started mental health first aid in the year 2000, we wanted to make the content as evidence-based as possible. Everything we taught in that course, we want to say, we have good scientific evidence that this is the right thing to do. So when we looked at the evidence, we found, well, there's very little. There's a lot about what mental health professionals should do for treatment, what are called clinical practice guidelines. But there was nothing for what the members of the public should do. So we thought, well, what do they do in conventional first aid like Red Cross and St. John teach? And what we found is that they have these international guidelines that are developed by an organisation called ILCOR, I-L-C-O-R. And it's an international collaboration between different first aid organisations. And they develop guidelines of how you do CPR, or help somebody who you might think might be having a stroke, or somebody who's had a snake bite or whatever it might be. And we thought, okay, this is what we need for mental health first aid. We need similar international guidelines. So the problem was, well, how do you develop them? So, in many medical areas, the gold standard evidence is the randomized controlled trial, where you randomize people to a treatment or a control group and look at the outcomes. But with mental health first aid situations, you can't feasibly do that. So you can't say to a member of the public, all right, if you have contact with someone you think might be suicidal, you do this, and we randomly assign someone, other members of the public, well, you do something else, and we'll see whether there's a difference. You can't practically or ethically do that. So the best evidence you're going to get is from the consensus of experts. We thought, well, who are the experts? In this area, there are 3 types of experts. There are people who are clinicians, practitioners in the area, who have expertise, for example, in how you help someone who's suicidal. We have people who've been there, people who've been suicidal themselves, consumers, and become advocates in the area, for example, and people who are carers or family members, say, of somebody who's been in that situation and developed an advocacy role. So what we did was we came up with a big, long questionnaire about all the things you might do, say, to help someone who is suicidal or someone having a panic attack. We gave it to these 3 panels of experts, the professional experts and the lived experience experts as consumers or carers, and we got the consensus of all 3 groups at a very high level. It's not going on. Slide isn't advancing, but we'll fix it. There we are. Okay. So what we did was we applied for a grant. Thanks, Betty. She fixed it. We applied for a grant to Australian Rotary Health to develop the first set of guidelines on how you help people in crisis situations. And this covered how you help someone who is suicidal, someone engaging in deliberate self-harm, someone who's out of contact with reality and might be perceived as threatening by other people, someone having a panic attack, and someone who's had a traumatic experience. So they could have been a victim of crime, or they could have been in a flood or a bushfire or whatever it might be. And we developed those using funding from Australian Rotary Health. And then we developed other guidelines that Betty's mentioned, getting other funding, because to get funding in any research area, you've got to start out. And Australian Rotary Health was our start. And then we got funding from other organisations like Beyond Blue to develop other guidelines. So he's going to fix it. I can't advance it. Yeah, okay. So then we developed, after our very first mental health first aid manual, our first edition, where we just did the best we could, we developed the second edition. And these are the manuals for the standard mental health first aid manual and the youth mental health first aid manual. And everything in those was based around the Australian Rotary Health funded guidelines. And that then spread internationally. So there are now, Betty said, 4 million people trained internationally. And everybody that's trained in those courses, what they're taught is based around those guidelines for crises that Australian Rotary Health funded. So it's had an enormous impact. Okay, then the next lot of funding we got was for teen mental health first aid, which Betty has mentioned. Now, Betty and I only had a very minor role in teen mental health first aid. It was actually, the leading lights were two younger colleagues of ours, Doctors Laura Hart and Claire Kelly, pictured there. And both of these people have had salary funding from Australian Rotary Health. So Laura Hart is a senior research fellow at the University of Melbourne and has done some tremendous research, both developing and evaluating mental health first aid. And Claire Kelly there on the right, she's head of curriculum and research at Mental Health First Aid Australia. And she got her start in the whole area developing the guidelines I mentioned about. That was her first job in the area. So teen mental health first aid is a 3.5-hour course. It's for high school students in years 10 to 12 on how to help their friends. And as Betty said, there's also now a course for younger high school students. So ARH funded a randomised controlled trial. So schools were randomly assigned to either get teen mental first aid training, or the control group was a short Red Cross course on physical first aid, looking at health problems like injuries, asthma attacks, and things that are common in teenagers. So the schools were randomised to get either of those, and various outcomes were evaluated. And what was found is that young people who had teen mental first aid, they were more confident to help a peer with a mental health problem. There was a decrease in their stigmatising attitudes. They're more willing to tell someone if they had a mental health problem to tell an adult. They were more willing to help a peer who was suicidal, which is a big taboo area to deal with someone who was suicidal and talk openly about suicidal feelings. And there was an increase in the number of adults that they saw as being likely to be helpful for them if they had a mental health problem. So that's just a brief overview of two research projects that have been very influential. As Betty said, the teen work now is spreading internationally to USA and other countries, and it's spreading widely now internationally. And Australian Rotary Health has been very influential in that. So I want to thank you. All donations made to Australian Rotary Health have come from Rotary clubs, Rotarians and corporations, and they enable support of the research that we were funded to do and others like it. So that brings us to the end of the talk. So if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer it. And I'll hand on the flowers now to Betty.
Okay, has anyone got any questions I'd like to put to either Betty or Tony? There is one in the Q&A. I'll ask that one if no one else has a question. No?
There is.
Have we baffled you all with science? No, okay. Well, the question that we've got here is, what are a few of the barriers? I think this is probably more towards you, Betty. What are a few of the barriers that you initially experienced early on in your research? And you can come back onto the screen. We can see your shoulder.
No, she's passed the flowers on to me, which means she wants me to answer this one. Okay, she can chip in. But the major barrier we had was there was just us. And we thought about mental health first aid in a very small scale. We thought we'd run 1 or 2 courses a year as volunteers in Canberra, where we then lived. We didn't really envisage it would get any better than us. So we didn't have really resources to do anything else. So what we did was we relied on family. So I said to Betty, how about you go and be the trainer? So Betty actually worked as a nurse at Canberra Hospital, and she reduced her paid working hours and worked a day a week as a volunteer in 2000, and that really got it going, actually. And then we drew on other family members. So we got a website. Our daughter did the website. Our son is an IT expert, and he developed a web instructor management system, quite a sophisticated one for other people who Betty trained as instructors. My brother is a retired lawyer, and he gave us a lot of legal help during it all. So we got what resources we could, and if you don't have resources, you ask your family to do it. But getting the initial funding from ARH was really important as well to allow us to do the guidelines, because we knew this needed to be done, but we didn't have the resources, and that allowed us to employ Claire Kelly for a few years to develop those. And then she went on and still works for Mental Health First Aid Australia as one of the leading staff there in that area. But as things have gone on and it's spread, it's got easier. It's when you start out that it's really hard, and you've got to just make do with what you can get. But success breeds success, and then things get easier as it goes. Betty.
No, I can't think of anything else to add.
Thanks for that. So has anyone else got any questions they'd like to ask? Yes, Mr. Greg Ross.
Yes, definitely not a question, but I would like just to add, since I do so much speaking about this, how proud I am to be able to mention you two, because going walking with a dog is one thing, but what you have turned that into is the most amazing tribute. I dips me lid to you, because really it's been a joy. When I first met you, Betty, and I know I sang at your retirement, but when I first met you, you said, Tony saved my life. That's how you started. That was the first thing you told me. And I knew Tony pretty well, but you just floored me because it was so in your face. But having seen what you've done over the last few years, and Lord Somers Camp and Powerhouse is an organisation I'm also involved with, and seeing the work of the young people there and how they've taken on mental health first aid, and you've extrapolated that around the world. I just want to say I think it's one of the great stories. When we started with sudden infant death syndrome and the original, all of that research from that had saved millions of lives. And I equate what you're doing to that sort of thing with mental health. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's one. Betty's also doing some work with District 9800 Rotary at the moment. She could probably tell you about that because maybe your district wants to do something. Betty.
What are we doing? Oh, so Warwick, he's the chair for
Warwick Cavell.
For vocational. He thought all the wonderful Rotarians who are doing great mentorship. We have police being mentored and ambulance officers being mentored in District 9800 and other professionals. And the Rotarians are doing this. And Warwick said everyone in a mentoring role should be a mental health first aider, should have this knowledge. And I tend to agree. It's interesting, when we first began this course, I was contacted by Norman Swan. I really respect Dr. Norman Swan. He's very astute. I think he does very well in communicating with the public about health things. And he somehow had his ear to the ground. I don't know how he heard that we were doing these mental health first aid courses. It was only Tony and I, but he was probably reading the scientific literature that we were publishing. And he said to me, everyone needs mental health first aid. The hairdressers, the taxi drivers, it's not just something for the school teachers or for particular community workers or whatever. It's just everyone, just like first aid is really relevant for everyone.
Yeah, the other thing that's happened in District 9800, thanks for the flowers, Betty, is we have a District 9800 ARH committee too. Betty and I are both on that. We were aiming to raise money, having this gala dinner as our main fundraiser, and it proved not to be possible for reasons you know, and it's been delayed. But our chair, Suresh Markandan, said, well, what else can we do? And he came up with the idea, well, we've got Betty here, we could run mental health first aid courses to raise funds for ARH and also raise awareness of mental health areas. So that's another thing that's now starting up in District 9800 as a fundraiser and awareness raising activity for what ARH is doing.
I see that Marty has a question.
Yeah. Marty's got a question there. After the courses that you're developing for the deaf, what's coming next?
I'm not sure. I think they need a lot of consolidation of the courses. And whenever a new course is done, it has to be evaluated, first of all, with what we call an uncontrolled trial, and then with a randomized controlled trial, because we don't allow them to go overseas to other suitable organizations in other countries until we really know that the course is doing what we're aiming for it to do, and the outcomes are good. So I think there's still quite a bit of research needs to be done about these new courses, and still the older person course. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to become a blended course. We felt some of the older people who would attend would not be so savvy with the online systems. So we haven't been able to deliver the face-to-face courses for the older person. So that's something that we need to catch up on.
But I think the big change that occurred during COVID is that mental health aid started out, it was all face-to-face. And then we realised in workplaces, people often find it difficult to say schedule staff off. So like if you're at a school, you can't schedule the teachers off. Somebody's got to teach the kids at once. So then, we developed blended. Blended means you do the knowledge part as e-learning online, and then you have a shorter face-to-face bit for the skills part. But then with COVID, the shorter face-to-face part wasn't possible. So very quickly, Mental First Aid Australia did work to develop that as a Zoom base. So now you can do the whole thing online, e-learning plus Zoom-based meetings. And Betty's doing one of those for District 9800 tomorrow afternoon.
Tomorrow morning. Surfing in the afternoon.
Tomorrow morning, yeah. So that's been a big, there are sometimes with difficult situations like we've had with COVID and the lockdown, you can get innovations coming out and you can get sort of benefits from it all. But I think this has made it a lot easier for, say, like people in rural, remote areas now to do mental first aid course. It's made it a lot easier for people in various workplaces to do it, people that have younger children and so on. So I think there's been a tremendous bonus about that development, which was pushed along by the necessity of the pandemic.
So another question is, you're saying that you're doing this work with District 9800. So if clubs or our district wanted to get involved, what's the process that we would need to go through? What are the costs associated with it? What's the time frame that we'd need to look at implementing something like this?
Okay, so if you're wanting, and I would be thinking for most Rotarians, it'd probably be the standard course, Adults Helping Adults, but it may be if you're in some of Ryla Ripe and some of the youth programs, you'd like to do the youth course, Adults Helping Teenagers. They're 12 to 14 hour courses. And if they're going to be delivered face-to-face, a venue is needed and you need to find a mental first aid instructor. Now, I'm an accredited mental first aid instructor and I'm offering my services free. And there may be some other instructors who may do that for Rotary. There may be some in your district, or otherwise often mental first aid instructors, they're not employed by Mental First Aid Australia. They've got their own autonomy and they can charge whatever fee they like. But a lot of them have a sliding scale so that they will, for not-for-profits or whatever, they'll be a cheaper fee. If you want to do the blended course where you do an e-learning first, $88 is the fee that goes straight to Mental First Aid Australia. For you to get access to the e-learning course, it's 5 to 7 hours. It's just full, it's amazing. I mean, you could take longer on it. There's so much information, there's videos, there's little exams, the little assessments at the end, each session, because you can't just go click, click, click and say, I've completed it. You have to actually get the answers right before you can progress through the e-learning. So that's an $88 fee. And then most instructors would charge a fee if you wanted the face-to-face bit at the end or over Zoom. They might charge, I don't know, $100 per person or whatever. And again, for District 9800, I'm giving that for free. Now, for the project where Warwick Cavell is getting Rotarian mentors trained, District 9800, the DG, Dale Hoy, has agreed to pay. I'm not sure why, I thought the Rotarians can, but he's agreed to pay that $88 per person to do the e-learning. And then I'm giving the Zoom bit for free. Does that answer your question, Mark?
Then for the ARH fundraiser, Betty's giving a time free, and then the money that goes to ARH.
Yeah, of course. Yes, they will. The Rotarians will pay to attend the course, but that doesn't go in my pocket. No, Brady and I have not made any money out of this. We've poured lots of time and money into this. We never saw this as a money maker. I think some people have dollar signs in their eyes. Some of the instructors because they have autonomy. I mean, they run lots of courses, charge really big fees, run them to corporate organisations, you know, thousands of dollars. But that hasn't been Tony's and my aim at all.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I do know several of our clubs, especially out in the east, you know, out in the East Gippsland area, have already done some of the coursework. And I think it's, you know, a fantastic opportunity.
If I could just add again that we did say what the website was, www.mhfa.com.au. And there you can go and look for wherever there are courses running. So there may be some instructors that have already got some of these blended courses or face-to-face courses running. You can look for your area. You can look for the different types of courses, be it an Aboriginal one, be it a youth one. Or you can look up instructors. You can see an instructor that you think looks really good. They all have a little profile up there, and you can contact them and say, you know, what would your fee be, or would you do this for us at such and such a fee, etc. Now, if Rotary can find a venue, if it is any face-to-face bit, and Rotary can find a venue, that really helps to keep the fees down.
I didn't realise it was created and nurtured so close to home. So congratulations, it's a great course. And it really helped me. I did it through Wellways, who I have a connection with. So yes, it was very interesting. So congratulations, both of you, on that. Thank you.
District Governor Bill, it's over to you.
Thank you, Tony and Betty. I found that very interesting, and it was quite exciting to hear the things that you've been doing with mental health first aid. I have had work experiences where a colleague became very depressed and didn't come to work for probably 9 months. But I probably had one of those stigma perceptions back in those days too. But whether that was because I got extra work because I had to do what he wasn't doing, I'm not sure. But yes,
we had them too. We learnt a lot from developing this course.
Yeah.
So I think it's great that we've been able to help with Australian Rotary Health. It was created back in '81 by the Rotary Club of Mornington, and there's a great read about Australian Rotary Health in the new centenary book that's just been published for 100 years of Rotary in Australia. And from page 61 on, for a few pages, you can read about Australian Rotary Health. And so it was started by, well, it sort of originated from the 51st Congress of the Advancement of Science, where Professor Alan Williams, Chief Pathologist for Melbourne Royal Children's Hospital, was complaining about the number of cot deaths. And he was bemoaning that there just wasn't any research or money for research to work out why babies were dying. So Ian Scott heard this and thought, I can do that. So he went back to his club and convinced them to find $2 million to help with the research for cot death. And we've gone on from there with changing the sleeping position of babies to prevent cot death. And when that was all finished, what do you do with Rotary, this new organisation? So they've put it into 4 areas of focus: mental health research, general health research, Indigenous health research, and nursing scholarships and things. Now, Indigenous Australian doctors and nurses are really essential role models for other Indigenous Australians considering career opportunities in health. So in 2016, in 2000, mental health was adopted as a principal area of future research. And then in 2016, under the chairmanship of Greg Ross, welcome, Greg. I really like listening to you, whether it's singing or otherwise. I'm not sure about Melbourne stuff all over your back wall, though. But you increased the image of mental health with the Lift the Lid campaign. Lift the Lid encompasses Hat Day and many other events, including the World Mental Health Day, which is happening right now. So the symbolism of Lift the Lid is represented in our diversity, celebrating research, breakthroughs. Nearly 1 in 2 people will suffer from a diagnosable mental health issue in their lifetime. Half will have been by the time they're 14 and 3/4 by the time they're 25. So the Australian Rotary Health Board is led by 12 people, and their work with current Rotary leadership, which I guess that's me in some ways, because all the Australian district governors are the shareholders of Australian Rotary Health. That's 27 of us, I think. So the work of the research board, of the 10 that do the grant applications, both boards and honorary, allowing 100% of the donations to go to research and study programs, and that's really great. Australian Rotary Health is one of the largest independent funders of mental health research within Australia. Through the generous support of Rotarians, Rotary clubs, Rotary districts, individuals, commercial and government supporters, Australian Rotary Health has funded more than $46 million of research since its establishment in 1981. We have created an awesome legacy that is vital to the health and welfare of Australia. So thank you everyone for your help in continuing this research and continuing the fundraising for this research.
So thank you for that, District Governor Bill. What I'd like to do is just put up for everybody there the Australian Rotary Health website. From the website there, you've heard of the great important work that Australian Rotary Health and Mental Health First Aid is currently doing. And all of these courses, all of this work, all needs our support. So if you go to the webpage there and you'll see the donate button, just click on that donate button, and your donations towards Mental Health First Aid. And as we've heard today with COVID, we are really facing another epidemic of mental health issues coming forward. So we really need to help and get behind this support. You'll see on there that the donation is defaulted to a minimum of $50. That would be absolutely fantastic. But any donation would be gratefully received. So if you don't want to do 50, 100, 250 or 500, which are the defaults there, just click down the bottom there and you can enter whatever value you so desire. And what we also really encourage you to do, if you're from a Rotary club, put down your Rotary club name and the district that you belong to. And that way Australian Rotary Health is able to track the donations from where they are coming and who is making the donations. And then you can select the drop-down box from there, and you can choose your preferred area of focus that you would like your donation to go to. And obviously today we are focusing on Lift the Lid and mental health. So, if you really have a passion for what we're hearing today, that would be the one that I would suggest that you put in there. And you can also enter a few comments. If you're making a personal donation, right down the bottom there is where you enter your personal details. And you don't have to worry, it is a fully encrypted system, so you don't have to worry about your credit card being scammed or anything else like that. And all donations over $2 are fully tax deductible. So I encourage each one of us to take it back to our clubs and encourage our clubs to make a donation to Australian Rotary Health and mental health particularly, or I also encourage each of us to make a personal donation.
But our club goes down to the Traralgon Centre Plaza on the Friday before this every year, and we have a stand there where we promote Lift the Lid and donations to mental health. And I'm not sure that I realised just how important it was until the first time I did this. And the number of people that came up to our stand and said, I want to give to a donation because I've had mental health myself, or another of my relatives has had mental health, and I think you're doing a fantastic job with this research. So please, can I give? So it surprised me, the number of people that came up and did that. So I think I didn't realise how rife it was until we did that.
This has been a very informative and interesting afternoon. I'd like to thank Tony and Betty, especially so as they continue their extended holiday due to the COVID restrictions. They're up in Kingscliff, north coast of New South Wales. So thank you very much for being here this afternoon and missing out on your beach. Thank you also to Mark Humphreys, Barry Thomas and Bill Dignam for their expertise and contributions this afternoon.
We do it for community. We do it cause we care. We do it cause we're Rotary, and Rotary's everywhere. We work because it's needed. We're on it every day. We want to make the world a better place, so Rotary's here to stay. Rotary is community. Rotary is care. Rotary Clubs Australia. Rotary's everywhere. People motivated, working every day to make our world a better place. That's Rotary today. To make our world a better place. That's Rotary today. For community, we do it cause we care. We do it cause we're Rotary, and Rotary's everywhere. We work because it's needed. We're on it every day. We want to make the world a better place, so Rotary's here to stay. Rotary is community. Rotary is care. Rotary's all around the world. Rotary's everywhere. People motivated, working every day to make our world a better place. That's Rotary.